Okay, so before we get to the Australian gold rush, I think it's quite important to go back and to look at what happened before the Australian gold rush, which is the California gold rush. Now, the California gold rush happens only a couple of years before the Australian one. Now, if the Australian one starts in 1851, the one in America started in 1848, so we're only talking a couple of years before. Now, gold is quite well known that gold has been used in many cultures for many thousands of years, but it wasn't necessarily something that had caused a gold rush like this up until now. So, where does it start in America? Before we start that, let's talk about something else. Back then, that part of America was actually Mexico. Now, Mexico, I'll show you in a second, just wait. Okay, so here's a down here is what it looked like back in 1846. This whole part here was owned by Mexico, and this part was owned by America. Put it in perspective, that, I don't know if you know much of these states, but I'll go through a few of them. That's Texas, okay? That's Arizona down here, somewhere around here, which would, yeah, Arizona. So that would mean that Las Vegas and stuff are in there. Hollywood's over here. San Francisco, where the San Francisco Bridge is, and all those different things. Washington's up here. All those parts here would have been, well, not necessarily Washington, but all these parts down here would have all been Mexico back then. And Mexico and the US had a war, the Mexican-New American War, in the 1840s. And just before, in 1847, they came to an agreement. Okay, they came to an agreement. They signed a treaty, and the treaty was that they were gonna, that basically America were gonna get Oregon over here and California over here. So part of California became America. So it says that they're occupied by the US after the American War, and Mexico basically just gave them that in the February in 1848, which is pretty close to when they found it. So what happened? How did they find this? There was a sawmill out in Sacramento, which is in California, and some guy was working there called James Marshall, and he accidentally found gold. Okay, and the person who owned the land wanted to keep the discovery a secret. As you will see throughout all the stuff with the gold rush we're going to do, keeping it secret is something really, really that a lot of people want to do, and you can see why because of what happens. But the rumor did spread, which is funny because there's no internet, there's no television or anything like that, no real radio. So to spread it would have just been through word of mouth, so people's talking, and through the newspaper. And you can see here there was an article in the newspaper which says about, this is what happened. This sawmill, someone found this gold, and it's supposed to be $30 worth. Now the average farmer in the US would have made about $200 a year. So the idea of finding $30 in one go would be basically like finding about a sixth of your, so probably effectively for someone like me, it would be like 2 months' wages in one little thing. So that made people's attention really, really, like they were really excited, and it made people come from everywhere. Okay, so you can see here, this is America. So all these people were coming to get to California, and they either took three different ways. They either came through the Panama, they came through this way. But a lot of people, here's the thing, if you were in New York, to get from New York to San Francisco was a long trip. So they were getting on a boat and going all the way down South America, down here, all the way up the top back of South America, all the way there, which would have taken them in about 8 months, 4 to 8 months to get there, to potentially strike it rich. And a lot of people went across the country on this thing called the Oregon Trails. I mean, that's crazy, right? Some people took this thing called the Panama shortcut, which was a different way of getting there. And as you can see, there are varying degrees of how much they cost. I'll move my face out of the way for a second so you can see some of them cost between $100 and $300, some of them cost $250 to $400, and some of them cost $100 to $200. Now that's almost a year's wages for some of these people just to get across there. And they didn't even necessarily know. See, there's the three different routes. The yellow route, which would cost $100 and $300. One of this one, 200, 400, and this one cost, how would I say here, $100 to $200. It's a lot of money just to get across there, potentially not to find anything. But this, like, excitement that you could strike it rich was huge. Very, very big. So you can see how people were getting there as they went west. Some people, they say, sorry about that. Some people, they say, even walked there. Like from like halfway across the country, they walked across the country to get there. I don't know how true that is. That's obviously a painting, so I can't necessarily be sure. But that was the level of excitement about this, what this would have been like. Now, the people in 1949 who came across to try to strike it rich, they're called the 49ers. That's what they're labeled as. They're labeled as a group of people called the 49ers. So they're farmers and other people who left their home to find gold. And like I said, a successful farmer finds about $300, makes about $300 a year. And if you had a really, really, really good day on the gold fields, you could find $25 a day, which is a lot of money. But that's if you found that. If you were lucky enough to be one of those people who were going to find money. But most people didn't find huge amounts of gold. They just found little gold flakes to try to sustain themselves. But really, sorry, I don't know what's going on with this picture. But yeah, and they gave up. Most of them gave up after a few months and just went back because it wasn't worth all that effort. Now, the 49ers, when I heard of that, it made me realize that there is a place in California called San Francisco. And San Francisco have a gridiron team, an NFL team called the San Francisco 49ers, which are called that after the 49ers who came to search for gold in 1849. And that name still lives on in the football team. Now, once again, Chinese people came as well, and they were escaping war and poverty, trying to make it rich. Europeans were coming across from Europe, Latin Americans from Mexico and from Brazil and from all those other parts of South America were coming to try to make a strike it rich, but pretty much all of them were going to experience discrimination. And we haven't talked about it here, but one of the big groups that would have suffered through discrimination were the Native Americans. They sometimes called Indian Americans, but we like to call them the Native Americans. And they were basically kicked off their land and sent to other places and quite violently treated and slaughtered in some cases. But they basically, very similar to Australia, they were dispossessed from their home because some other person wanted their land. There are a few success stories in this, the people who made it rich and things like that. A man who sold supplies to miners and became the first California millionaire. Um, Someone else struck it rich, and now there's a famous coffee company in America called Foger's. And also the guy who invented Levi's, which if you know anything about blue jeans, Levi's are the most popular jeans in the world. So that also came out of the gold rush. That's pretty much it. The gold rush in California wasn't really that successful. It wasn't like a whole bunch of people made it rich and and changed their lives forever. There were those stories, but it wasn't um, that successful. So then you can understand that we're now getting to a stage where when the Australian one does hit a few years later and they hear that things are different down here and that there's a lot of different areas and there's a lot of gold, you can see that not only do we have a lot of people trying to escape their homes, trying to come here, but the people who were basically had tried to their luck in California, who now didn't have much place to go, now they packed up all their stuff and tried to come all the way over to Australia to see if they could strike it rich here. That's basically the California gold rush in a very, very short, succinct lesson. We're not going to go too much into it because that's not what we're studying this term, but I thought it would be an interesting way to show what was happening in the world in the few years beforehand to make the gold fever becoming a little bit more, um, I don't know, maybe cause a bit of excitement and up and just within the world. All right, so I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching.